CDF being a reliable partner for US, for Saudi Arabia, and for Qatar.
Marium Fatima is a security expert and a professor at National Defense University Islamabad. She's joining us from Islamabad, and we'll ask her about the significance of the visit of CDF Asim Munir to Tehran and if that visit will lead to Islamabad MOU getting rekindled. Marium Fatima, thank you so much for joining us. CDF Asim Munir, along with Mohsin Naqvi, they are in Tehran and they are speaking to Iranian authorities. And this all is happening in the backdrop of Islamabad MOU. If we can start by asking you, where does the Islamabad MOU currently stand?
Peace process is always a lengthy process. It is not without obstacles. There are times when the peace talks they stall. There are times when they are resumed. Then the conflict can again escalate. This would be followed by ceasefire. So it's always like every conflict has its own life. So every conflict takes its own trajectory. So I would like to begin with the fact that Islamabad MOU has been in abeyance or suspension, or it has been set aside by the parties as I speak to you. But this is what I think that has materialized because of how the conflict has re-escalated between US and Iran in the last 1.5 months. However, Islamabad MOU had actually very strong, important points which were of significance to the parties. It was an agreement to enter into an agreement after talks. So that was the beginning of the 60-day window of opportunity for both the parties to go ahead and process their technical issues, which included the nuclear program that Iran had. Also, it included the defreezing of Iranian assets and how Iran was going ahead with demands on defreezing of its assets in the West. So, and Strait of Hormuz, of course.
Mariam,
these are the things.
If I can ask you about the mediators, ever since this process began, there has been a lot of conjecture on who the main negotiator is. And time and again, both the US and Iran have maintained that Pakistan remains the sole and the primary mediator. But since Islamabad MOU, and even before Islamabad MOU, we saw countries like Qatar or even Oman, stepping up and playing a certain role of facilitation. But when we see it today, when we see CDF Asim Munir sitting in Tehran, I think one key takeaway from all of this episode is that even till today, probably Pakistan is the only country that both Iran and the US trust right now, that they are talking to each other through Pakistan. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with this. And there were talks all this time, indirectly, back and forth. Pakistan was shuttling diplomatic moves between US and Iran, even when there was this breakdown of direct talks between US and Iran. And Pakistan is the most trusted partner. It's a middle power. Pakistan doesn't have any person stakes involved in this conflict. You see, if you look at Oman and Qatar, they have their stakes involved in the conflict. Plus, Qatar is also hosting US air bases. And then there is two things that are very much in favor of Pakistan. As Pakistan is a middle power, Pakistan is reliable for both the Muslim world, for Iran, which is a party to the conflict, and for US as well in this region. And then Pakistan's leadership at this moment, it is very well positioned with CDF being a reliable partner for US, for Saudi Arabia, and for Qatar. And there are many Middle Eastern countries which are gravitating towards Pakistan, and also for Iran. So if we look at it from that perspective, Pakistan there is always this very important point that we need to understand, that a country is always dependent on the personality of the leader. So the current leadership is very well positioned to have open access channels with all the parties which are in this conflict, which are directly involved, and also which are indirectly present in this conflict, which are the stakeholders of this conflict. So Pakistan is the mediator. Even if anybody, I would like to name countries such as Israel or India or any other country with malintentions are trying to vilify Pakistan's name as not a credible, trusted mediator, I think that doesn't hold ground, because the parties which are actually disputing parties, which are engaged in the conflict, they are showing absolute reliance on the leadership and on Pakistan's ability to deal with the crisis as the sole mediator, which is credible, trusted, neutral, and it is having access. It can message, it can convey, and it can also bring the parties to make itself understood. So I think that Pakistan is playing a very good role in this
Mariam,
regard, and the
I
leadership
think
is to be credited for.
one of the sticking points, I think one of the most important sticking point of this whole conflict is Strait of Hormuz right now. Is there a legal framework that you envisage or you think that can be agreed upon where this issue is resolved and both the US and Iran, they come back on the table and they come up with a solution for Strait of Hormuz? Do you think this is possible?
So this is very important point for us to understand that the Strait of Hormuz is now a leverage point for all the disputing parties. And I think Iran is leveraging Strait of Hormuz to a great extent. Why? Because Iran has felt that it has been, its sovereignty has been violated. It is in an economic sanction position for a while. Also, there have been negotiations and peace processes in the back in the day. But during those peace processes, Iran was attacked. So I think Iran at this point is really intending to use Strait of Hormuz as a leverage point for ensuring that in the future no country would be able to attack Iran.
In terms of leverage, I think another leverage that America is using right now is the economic sanctions. President Trump, just 2 or 3 days ago, he announced that he would announce sanctions on Iran, which would be unprecedented, and he since has. Do you think that these sanctions could be one way of pressurizing Iran to come back to the table?
So I think that if Iran could not be made to come back to the table by attacking Iran, its infrastructure, its civilian population, and also decapitating its leadership, if Iran couldn't be forced to come to that, and Iran was in a position to actually give a very hard blow to the economy of the entire region, and also Iran was able, by showing resistance to the US attacks and Israeli attacks, Iran was able to ensure that this world has entered into a multipolar world where there are other powers to be considered as well, such as China, which is a rising power, and I believe it has risen already. And also, if you look at Russia, it's again a survival. It's sustaining itself again. It is also again reviving itself. So if we look at it from that perspective, now the middle powers really matter. Iran is also a middle power. Iran has shown significantly to the world that by having a resolve and by showing resistance and opposition to the world, by not giving in to the demands of the superpowers, Iran has basically given this very strong message that it is not going to agree to any term which is going to jeopardize, compromise its sovereignty in any way. I think Iran is ready to give more sacrifices in order to ensure that
one important thing that you mentioned earlier was the unprecedented nature of Pakistan's mediation. You mentioned the role of Chief of Defense Forces. How unprecedented is his influence? You mentioned his relations with the US, with the Saudis, with the Iranians, and even Turkey as well. Have, in your own research or your study of the history of Pakistan, have you ever seen this much influence wielded by one person or one institution in Pakistan's history?
So I would like to be very objective. Pakistan always had a very bold foreign policy, and it was always based on principles. Pakistan believes in state interests. Also, Pakistan believes in having principled position over issues of geopolitical import, and also
a lot of experts would say that Pakistan has been able to stop a third world war, and a lot of experts have said that.
Let me come to this point. But in the current scenario, if we look at Pakistan, despite having internal issues, Pakistan having a very volatile and hostile neighborhood, Pakistan, despite being very concerted efforts that India has made to isolate Pakistan, Pakistan has told the world, and it has given this message that Pakistan is very well positioned even today. If we talk about the world in terms of polls, Pakistan is the pole for the Middle East and the whole Muslim world. Pakistan is not just a middle power for me. For me, it is one of the poles. It's a multipolar world. Pakistan is the pole for the Muslim world. And why is it so? Because our leadership is very well positioned. It is having attraction in the Muslim world. It is having attraction with the West. It is a credible, reliable partner for the Europe, for US, for all the Eastern economies, South Korea, and all the other countries. And Pakistan actually has averted a third world war by trying to stabilize this region. And how did Pakistan do it? Pakistan has ensured that the Middle Eastern countries do not get embroiled in a mutual war of destruction with respect to Iran. So I think Pakistan has been playing a very stabilizing role in this region. And Pakistan has actually averted a humanitarian crisis. And when I talk about a third world war, it's a very common term that we use all the time. For me, humanitarian crisis is the word that denotes Pakistan's efforts to bring about stability in this region.
Marium Fatima, thank you so much for joining us.